RtI meeting on March 9th at Mitchell Elementary. In attendance at this meeting were the three third grade general education teachers, the RtI specialist from Mitchell Elementary, the SPED teacher, and the dyslexia specialist. This meeting was to discuss the scores of the 5 students in the 3rd grade who received special education services and whether they were improving over the course of the year. This meeting felt drastically different than my ARD meeting. This meeting was very relaxed, and it was during the lunch break of all the teachers, and it didn't really have a structure. Though they knew they had to discuss these 5 students, there was no recording, there was no super schedule that we had to follow. It was just seemed very relaxed, and it was just there to discuss how the students were improving. Though I felt more comfortable with the relaxed nature of this meeting, I did feel as though there was not as much accomplished as the other meeting. One thing that really stuck with me is that of the 5 students discussed in this RtI meeting and my one discussed in my ARD meeting, is that all 6 of them were Hispanic. And I think that this really parallels what we've been talking about in survey class and in our DI class about how there's overrepresentation of minorities in special education. I mean, what are the odds that at this school that the 6 students that I would be part of in their RtI and ARD meetings were all Hispanic and all from the 3rd grade, and it's just not a coincidence, and I found it very odd that all of them were Hispanic. And though this was an RtI meeting, I felt like a lot of the decisions that were made were not based on test scores, which is all that we learned about in RtI. And I thought this was more judgments from the teachers and just whether they thought they should have more services or whether they were advancing, and there was nothing really based on the test scores. And something that really stuck out to me was that one of the teachers said that the grades that the students make don't even matter because they keep giving them chance after chance to bring their grades up to 70s or to a 100 if they fail. And so if we continually raise up their grades and let them retake things, then their grades don't really reflect the actual scores that they're making. So some of the students that we discussed would actually have a grade of like a 40 in the class, but they have a B in the class because they were able to retake things. So the grades that they're making don't really reflect their actual scores. So when they take assessments, they're just bombing them, and it's not really reflecting well in their RtI scores, so they don't know how to help them. So I thought that was a real problem that the teacher brought up, was that their grades in class are supposed to be considered for RtI, but if you look at them, these students are getting Bs and sometimes As, and it's not really reflecting that they need services as well as an RtI score should. Overall, I thought this meeting was not very successful. Out of the 6 students, there was only one firm decision made, and there was a few of them that said that they would make decisions further along depending on how the test scores changed, and in some of them there were no decisions made. So I felt like this meeting didn't really have a good closing point or a good conclusion where they reached great decisions based on the data that they received from their RtI scores. My son's was one of the students discussed in this RtI meeting, and frankly, I'm very offended with how unprofessional the teachers were discussing the problems that my student struggles with. This meeting was over an hour long, and more than 30 minutes of it were spent discussing only my son, and in the end there was no real conclusion made. Most of the decisions that were even talked about on whether to implement with my son were not based on his RtI scores at all, but more based on personal observations of his behavior. And though I understand these are important for the teachers, when dealing in RtI, it is important that you use their scores to determine where they need help. My son was also talked about in this RtI meeting, and I felt that they really talked about his RtI scores and how they were not really improving, but I did think that they got to the root of his problem. Currently, for my son, they are testing him on 2nd grade level RtI, and he's showing improvement on that, but when they move him on to the 3rd grade level, he's not really improving that much. So currently I think the decision was that they should kind of keep working with him and see if they can move him up to the 3rd grade level. Currently he's in Tier 2 instruction, and though they don't think they should move him to Tier 3, but he might be going there in the future. I think that the teachers are working on it, and I'm really proud of my son for improving, but I think he needs a little bit more help in order to reach that 3rd grade level. My daughter was one of the students discussed at this RtI meeting, and I thought that her teacher did a wonderful job at identifying where she struggles. Currently, my daughter has trouble with reading. She's currently reading at a grade level below her, and so her teacher has been working with her on trying to get her to get better scores. But if you look at her RTI scores, she's not really improving. So her teacher decided that she should be moved up to Tier 3, and the Tier 3 specialist agreed. And I'm really glad that her teacher was able to work with her and see that she's still struggling, and she needs a little bit more intervention and much more intensive instruction to help her improve her reading.